Joining us today for the panel discussion, we have Amy Worley, Acting CEO at the Australian Network on Disability, Vicky Little from SpecialStone, and Emra Oliver, Disability Inclusion Sponsor at Accenture. Welcome, everyone.
I'm Amy Worley, Acting CEO at Australian Network on Disability. We're a for-purpose organisation resourced by our members, Accenture being one of our members, to advance the inclusion of people with disability across all areas of business. So we work with organisations to support them to be actively inclusive of people with disability, both from an employee and a customer perspective, to ensure that people with disability have access to goods and services, education, employment, and the community at large.
Vicky Little, National Manager at SpecialStone Australia. So SpecialStone is a social enterprise that assists businesses to recruit and support people on the autism spectrum to find meaningful employment. So we do that by removing the barriers that exist in the interview process and the recruitment process at large. So we know that there's significant barriers there with the interview, with the resume. So we disrupt that process. We enable businesses to trial a practical assessment tool through our hiring programs to ensure that businesses can access the untapped talent pool and also that people can gain meaningful employment.
Hi, I'm Emra Oliver. I'm a Managing Director from our Melbourne office. I work with our resources clients, and I was born with one hand. Out of work, I'm involved in lifesaving. I'm actually Victoria's first one-armed lifesaver, and I volunteer with kids of all abilities down at my local lifesaving club over the summer.
Now, on the topic of disability inclusion, it's great to see more happening in this space because not only does it help more people with disabilities access the workforce, from a business perspective, it gives access to a broader talent base as well. So, Amy, how are organisations addressing disability inclusion?
As you say, it is great to see an increase in focus on the inclusion of people with disability. And some of the key areas that organisations like Accenture are taking are ensuring that there's leadership support, so there's clear messaging from the top of their commitment to the inclusion of people with disability, as I said, both from an employment perspective but also from a customer perspective. There's also, so that's the top down, and then a bottom up approach is ensuring that the voice of people with disability, employees with disability is heard across the organisation. So establishments of employee resource groups that really help bring forward the understanding of the experience of employees and future employees with disability. And the third area is making sure that our products and services, what we deliver to our customers, is accessible.
Yeah, three very important areas there. And when it comes to the workplace, how can we ensure people with disabilities are empowered to thrive?
It's incredibly important to create a culture that understands, accepts, and celebrates people with disability. Specifically, to create an autism-friendly culture, you really need three things. So you need an understanding workplace. The strongest indicator of success of the success of an employee on the autism spectrum is an understanding manager. And the key indicator of an autism-friendly culture is education and for managers at all levels. So really, it all comes down to taking the time to understand people with disability, employees with autism, and if that's done, then that's creating that first element, is that understanding workplace. The second element is about a willingness to implement meaningful accommodations. So it's making sure that they're tangible, but also responded to in a timely manner. So, employees are going to feel heard and understood if managers really take the time to listen, but also to go about and put those into action. So I know Accenture, for example, have clear processes about how to disclose their disability and ask for accommodations through the DART. But it's also reviewing those on a regular basis because things change, particularly for people with autism, their support needs might change. And thirdly, it's an inclusive organisational culture. So whilst the organisational culture needs to adopt inclusive practices as a whole, it's actually the CEOs and the managers that can influence the attitudes towards diversity. And so it's with that you'll see that people with disability and employees with disability will feel empowered and will be able to thrive.
Emma, I'd love to hear your lived experiences on this. What have workplaces done to make those environments more inclusive for you, where you could really feel like you could thrive?
I think for me, it's focusing on what you can do. So focusing on the ability, not the disability. It's looking at the person, not the disability. So people being able to having an environment where you can bring your authentic self to work. I've had many situations over my career where people have been slightly uncomfortable about whether to ask about why I've got one hand. I found talking about it has taken that mystery away, and then it actually becomes a non-issue. I've been very lucky in my career that people have focused on what I can do as opposed to what I can't do. And I think what Vicky said, having an environment where you can ask for help, and if you need something particular or something that has changed over a period of time, an environment where you can ask for help, and the organisation will provide that help, whatever that might be.
And Amy, what about your perspective on this?
Well, fabulous answers from Emma and Vicky, and to follow on from that, employers and managers want to do the right thing. Certainly the intention is always good, but often it's not understanding how. So by ensuring that you've got practices and procedures in place, like Accenture does with the disability accommodation request tool, it provides a framework for people to be able to confidently and comfortably follow. Individuals don't have to have all the answers around what adjustments an individual needs, but as Emma mentioned, it's about having the conversation around what is it that you need in this environment to be able to thrive, and then a process that you can follow to implement, and as Vicky mentioned, in a timely manner.
So we've talked about changes at an organisation level, but what can we as individuals do to make a difference?
I think looking around the teams that you work with and making sure there's people that look and think differently than you. I think that's how you make diversity and inclusion actually come to life. Be open to seeing different ways of doing things. So if you've got a disability, be courageous and ask for help if you need it. You might be surprised by the answer. Or if you're working with someone that has a disability, ask them how they're going and whether there's something that you as an individual could do for them. And you start that conversation, you might be surprised where it ends. I think for our clients, it's important for our clients to also see that we employ people that aren't all the same, because that's how we live diversity and inclusion out in the broader marketplace.
Look, I think Emma's points, carrying on from that, very much about changing the conversation and asking the person. I think there's a lot of assumptions, particularly about hidden disabilities. And to Emma's point, if you ask, you're more likely to receive a positive response. And it goes back to my previous points, firstly, to create a culture where someone feels like they can come forward and disclose, because that's the very first piece.
And going back to the individual, we have 3 guiding principles that may be useful for the audience today, and really reiterates everything that Emma and Vicky said, which is to don't assume. So we can't assume the experience an individual has or the disability an individual has. Ask the person, so ask what you can do differently to ensure that they can thrive and be productive and be successful, and that a person's disability is as unique as their fingerprint. So no disability is the same, no experience is the same, and so but based on not making assumptions, asking the person and considering each individual as unique is really a great foundation to ensure that you're providing an inclusive and accessible experience.
Emma, Vicky, Amy, thank you all for your time today. It's been a really great discussion. I appreciate you sharing all your insights and wisdom, so thank you.